Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices is made possible in part by Allstate and CIBC, and by the support of these donors.
Good evening y bienvenidos to Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices. I'm Araceli Gomez Saldana, host and reporter with WBEZ. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, health professionals say the fatal shooting of Adam Toledo by police has led to a mental health crisis among Latino youth, a look at the resources available. A bill in the General Assembly would let voters in cities and towns decide if they want to lift the state's long-standing ban on rent control in their communities. A local Latina in tech gives us la Ultima Palabra on pandemic-induced career changes.
It made us feel better about our future in terms of, his independence.
And a Chicago bakery where unique people are the icing on the cake. First off tonight, news of 13-year-old Adam Toledo's fatal shooting by Chicago police left many in the city's Latino community struggling to process yet another trauma in what has already been a difficult year. And health professionals are warning that watching the police cam video of Toledo's death can be particularly damaging to the mental health and emotional health of Latino youth. Joining us to talk about how to support youth in this time are Nestor Flores, Director of Behavioral Health Initiatives at Pilsen Wellness Center, and James Hurlburt, Director of Education at Latino Youth High School. That's an alternative high school that's a division of Pilsen Wellness Center and an affiliate campus of Youth Connections Charter School. Nestor, we'll start with you. What are you hearing from families you serve about how they're doing and how their children are reacting to Toledo's shooting?
It runs the spectrum of reactions. I wish I could tell you there was a certain one, but really it goes from shock to fear to ambivalence to we've seen this before. This is what our communities are usually like. So it runs the gamut, and unfortunately, in our clinics, we obviously treat when it gets to the shock part or the fear part, because it does lead to an increase in symptoms and anxiety, depression.
And unfortunately, James, your school experienced another traumatic loss with the recent shooting death of one of your students, 17-year-old Lidia Jimenez. And how do you support your student body when this kind of trauma happens so close to home?
So it's been especially difficult this year. And normally when we are in the school year and if we face a tragedy, and unfortunately most years we will have an incident of a shooting and occasional deaths. In those situations, we benefit greatly from being part of Pilsen Wellness Center. We have 2 therapists that are on site at our school every day that are able to provide mental health services and crisis care for our students. CPS also has a crisis team that will send out an additional therapist that can work with students and faculty, because it also hits our staff very hard too in these situations. This year, for the most recent tragedy, because we're remote, it's been very hard to gauge what services our students need. YCCS has set up a care line that we made sure that all of our students were aware of, so that if they were having a problem processing this event, they did have someone to talk to.
Especially right now with children being at home. Nestor, what kind of advice do you have for parents who are looking out for their own children, especially since it's so difficult to not hear about the news or watch the video?
Yeah, it's going to be difficult just given media these days to be able to shield them from exposure to this. So we really do recommend having honest conversations about it. It's not so much that you could avoid watching it. It's more like, bringing up the subject, not being afraid of talking about it, and then answering as many questions as the parent could possibly answer, but also being able to say, I don't know, like I don't have answers to the complexity of this.
And Nestor, especially with this particular case, sometimes parents get involved in victim blaming. What advice do you have for parents to not fall into that trap?
I think from the perspective of psychology of of therapy, we understand why someone would do that. So we certainly don't judge or shame anyone who's, in this case, like as you say, victim blaming. But once that's heard, we start this sort of psychoeducation process, and that would be, how does that actually serve your child or anyone you're talking about on this subject? How does it serve them to blame the victim, right? And it doesn't, because what it ends up doing is it's invalidating a whole community, invalidating a whole whoever you're talking to about this, or all young people.
Back to you, James. Do you think, what do you think about your students perceive or how do they process police violence differently than other types of violence they might encounter?
So part of it's on a spectrum. Our students, when I started teaching, a few of my colleagues, discussed with me, how was it, working at an options school? And they, a few of them mentioned that, your students must have a lot of post-traumatic stress. And at first I agreed with them, but the issue is they really don't, it's not post-traumatic, it's current. Our students are under a lot of stress all the time, which affects their ability to perform. Police brutality, unfortunately in Chicago, this is something that has a long history, and our communities have lost trust with the police, and this just feeds into the cycle of violence. I feel that it's become normalized for a lot of our students. And I know one of the things that we try to do here at the school is talk and explain that this isn't normal. It might unfortunately be normal in this particular situation, this particular time, but it's something that you should not have to experience. It's something that is a tragedy and it is something that we can work together with to address. And that's one of the things with the movements that started after George Floyd's death. In June, I was very proud of a lot of our students when they were participating in the marches in Pilsen and Little Village with the Black and Brown Alliance, that there were people who were trying to really come in and separate us. But this is something that is affecting all of us, and they need to realize that. And I think a number of our students are really starting to begin to process that.
There's a lot of emotions that went through last summer as well with the protest and just community building. And Nestor, I want to go to you. What support or what resources would you recommend to a family who's worried about their students' emotional well-being or their child's emotional well-being?
Yeah, as a practicing therapist and running these clinics, my go-to thing is to get counseling, 100%. And not to wait until things get severe, because we try to educate the community and parents onto how to identify the first symptoms of depression, of anxiety, of a stress reaction. And so if they see any symptoms, any changes in behavior, any acting out, definitely counseling, I think, is essential as an additional support to the young people, to the families, to the community. And I agree with James. We definitely, it's a huge issue to normalize this, and we could easily, the families inadvertently could normalize it as well and not seek services and support. So definitely counseling, I think, is right up there.
Yeah, ask for help when you need it, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, thanks so much to Nestor Flores and James Hurlburt. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Up next, a debate over rent control. Stay with us. Since 1997, rent control has been banned in Illinois. A bill working its way through the General Assembly would create some wiggle room, giving cities and towns a chance to hold a referendum vote on whether their municipality should allow rent control. At a hearing earlier this week, state lawmakers debated the bill, with opponents saying it won't boost affordable housing stock and supporters saying it should be up to the voters to decide.
The reason that we have Section 8, we have RAD programs, we have subsidized living is because the government correctly comes in and says, we need to allow for affordable housing to bridge gaps. What this legislation does is you're allowing local units of government to enter into the private sector and dictate the rents.
I recognize something that I've heard a number of my colleagues say. The reality is that Chicago is very different from rural Illinois. And rural Illinois is very different from Naperville, and Naperville is certainly very different from East St. Louis. I think that this bill really gives us an opportunity to leave it to the voters to decide where they stand, and then really go back to the local authorities to decide if they want to entertain the conversation.
Joining us now with more are Michael Glasser of the Neighborhood Building Owners Alliance, who opposes it, and Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez of Chicago's 25th Ward, a supporter of the bill. Alderman, we'll start with you. Why do you think rent control is an effective tool?
That we have in our communities, a broken property tax system that gives subsidies to developers and those who are well off, but doesn't do enough to help the small homeowner, doesn't do enough to address the speculation in our communities. What we need is a stability. We need a stability right now, especially in the middle of a pandemic, and this does just that, create a stability, creates a certainty, and addresses the speculation that is really hurting our communities. I think this is a bill about democracy, about stability in our neighborhoods. This is something that Governor Pritzker committed to do, which is lift the ban on rent control, so municipalities can do their job and start creating incentives and help for those small homeowners, those tenants who need the help, and all those developers who have taken advantage of the situation.
And Michael Glasser, can you tell us why you're concerned about allowing municipalities to vote on rent control?
Well, thank you for that. The proposal that's out there would allow any unit of local government, whether it's a ward or a precinct or even a school district, to make its own choice about rent control by referendum. The alderman speaks about the need for stability or certainty. I can't think of a greater disaster or anything more confusing or anything that would lead to greater disinvestment in the city of Chicago or anywhere in the state if any level of local government by referendum could make a decision that justifiably and ought to be made by elected officials who are chosen to make those decisions. Why are we going to allow this particular issue to be decided by referendum, and where does it stop? Should we allow the price of milk to be decided by local referendum? Should we have any other issues that the state legislature should be deciding, handled by a referendum, by school boards or ward or by precinct? It's a disaster and greatly destabilizing. And by the way, the housing community right now, in light of the pandemic and the health and economic consequences, we're in crisis. I mean, it's not, tenants are in crisis, housing providers are in crisis. This is absolutely the wrong time to be considering something like this.
And we'll get to the pandemic effects in just a moment. Alderman Sigcho Lopez, to Michael's point, why allow for local referenda rather than doing it away with rent control entirely?
Because we have seen developers and realtors influence government so that we're right now with our hands tied. I keep hearing always from developers this doomsday. Well, doomsday already happened in our community. The destabilization that developers have created in our community is atrocious. To allow the developers to come and solve the problems that we have, please, let's use some common sense. I think that what we need right now is democracy. I mean, if we have a governor who committed to lifting the ban on rent control so that we here locally can give subsidies to those small homeowners who are keeping their rents affordable, why should we subsidize big developers? Why should we subsidize those who are doubling and tripling the rents? No, we should help those small homeowners who are helping their tenants. And the private sector, and if they want to invest in our communities, do so. They talk about helping our communities. I see very little help. What I see is greed. That's what we see. Greed and no compassion for small homeowners and tenants who get 30-day notice. What we want is democracy, to be able to have self-determination. Here in the 25th Ward, over 70% of people voted to leave the ban on rent control so that we can help the small homeowner with subsidies, so that we can help address the speculation. What Mr. Blasio is describing is exactly what's happening here. A speculation, people being evicted, 21,000 evictions because of these private developers' 30-day notice. We don't even have just cause for eviction, so people can be evicted for no reason. We have schools who are being affected. We have low enrollments. How are they going to help us with that? The private sector has not helped us. Mr. Glazer, you got to start being honest about this situation. I think that we do need regulation. We need common sense policies. We cannot continue to allow developers to dictate our laws any longer.
Alderman, before we go back to Michael, we are in the midst of a pandemic. Why do you think this is the right move now for the communities that you serve?
It is very important that we have a stability, as I said. We need to lift the ban, and we understand the difference. I think we heard from one of the legislators, the differences between our communities. So let's do it democratically. If there are areas of the state where lifting the ban doesn't have the support of the community, we respect that.
And Michael Glasser, question to you. Right now we've seen how landlords have been affected by the pandemic. What is the situation there?
Well, first of all, I'd like to correct the alderman. He keeps using the word developer when the great bulk of the people that own multifamily buildings in the neighborhoods are hardworking families that want to take care of their futures, and they put a tremendous amount of sweat equity and their life savings on the line to purchase a building, whether it's a 3-flat or a 6-flat, or even upwards to 20 units or more. These are the people that own the buildings in the neighborhoods, and they're very committed to their tenants.
And we're going to help them. We're going to help them, Mr. Glazer, not to the developers that you represent.
You know what, sir, you don't, I'm going to just say that I represent an organization that's filled with people that work hard to purchase and maintain quality housing throughout the city. I'd like to just comment that in terms of the pandemic, it's been a very challenging year for many tenants and for many housing providers. We've conducted our own surveys, and we have roughly 300 people that have responded, and our statistics show that nearly 70% of them are folks with under, I think it's 5 buildings or less. And these folks are sharing the tremendous challenges with an economic fallout from and a lack of income that comes in. And Mr. Alderman, I'd like you to understand that when we don't have income, we have to then figure out how we're going to operate our 3-flats, our 6-flats. And I have many stories, many friends that I've made in the past year throughout the city that have to make painful choices.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks again to Michael Glasser and Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
According to a Drexel University study, 42% of young adults with autism never worked for pay in their 20s, a statistic that reflects the difficulty many people with autism can have in making the transition from school into the working world. But a Chicago woman has cooked up a way for those young adults to develop crucial social and work skills while contributing their own unique flavors to the business. Chicago Tonight's Erica Gunderson has the story.
We've got some vanilla cupcakes here. Some are filled with coconut cream and others are filled with passion fruit.
The aromas wafting through this West Side kitchen make it obvious where the sweet in the name Unique Sweets comes from.
We're topping them with some coconut. That's what Shannon's doing here.
I'm putting coconut on for the cupcakes to make it pretty.
And then Jeremiah's cutting marshmallows, and then that'll be the final product.
The unique part? That's another story.
The treats that we make are unique, especially since they're made by unique individuals, hence Unique Sweets.
Christina Torres and her fellow bakers are members of the social enterprise Unique Sweets. By baking treats like these cupcakes, which they sell at pop-up events and through social media, the teens and young adults with autism who participate are developing work and social skills. Founder Lisa Curiel says there is a place for everyone to contribute in their kitchen.
Autism is different for everybody. There's no two people that are the same or that experience it the same. We try to find something for everybody. And everybody transitions through all of the process so that everyone has an opportunity to find what they like.
Lisa started Unique Sweets from her home kitchen in 2018 to help her son Sebastian, who has autism, bridge the gap between school and the working world.
He had finished high school and he was in City College and he wasn't ready to get a job. And I felt like him and his friends had so much potential. And one day, the story is, and we laugh about it, is that they had a party and they all brought baked goods. And it just struck me as though this was something that we could combine, use a little project management, use some job skills training, and then bake because they like to bake, and it was kind of an instant project. And that's how it started.
Sebastian is no longer in the kitchen, but Lisa says he is still using skills he learned through Unique Sweets to help it grow.
He works with me on purchasing and inventory and getting things ready for the actual bake and all that background work that has to happen. Not everybody wants to pursue a degree in pastry or culinary arts. Whatever you're going to do, you're going to have to interact with others, you're going to have to plan. And what I hope that they get from their time with us is a sense of achievement, that they can do it and that they can take those skills and apply them to the next chapter in their life.
In David Figueroa's case, he found a way to use his art skills to decorate more than cupcakes.
David loves to draw. That is his thing. He'll do art to go with that holiday or whatever we're doing. And then he'll put a message on there and then he puts it right on the box when it's ready to get picked up.
David is nonverbal, which his mother says sometimes made it difficult to find community.
We have had a really hard time finding organizations and things where he can be a part of, where what he enjoys and his, what he's able to do is highlighted. And so it made me feel like he had a place, there was something for him, that he can have there was a future for him. It made us feel better about our future in terms of, his independence.
Omaida says she too has found a sense of belonging with Unique Sweets.
It's given me an opportunity to find people that kind of have the same struggles that I do and have the same celebrations that I do.
And for baker Cristina Torres, bringing her own unique flavor to that community is helping her flourish.
This was when we did the Boricua Barrio Arts Festival in Humboldt Park. And when we were, selling out all those cupcakes, especially the different flavors like the coquito, the piña colada, the pancha, that kind of gave me the indication that where I felt like I'm where I need to be right now.
For Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, this is Erica Gunderson.
And you'll find more on Unique Sweets on our website. If there's one thing everyone has had to learn to do in the last year thanks to the pandemic, it's adapt, making heel turns in everything from how we grocery shop to how we work, or in the case of a violinist and former bank teller, Rachel Gonzalez, the kind of work we do. Here, she gives us La Ultima Palabra on her pandemic pivot into the tech world.
My name is Rachel Gonzalez. I'm a Latina in tech, and I just completely changed my career in the middle of a pandemic. I'm a lifelong musician. I've been playing violin for 17 years, and I have a bachelor's degree in music. I started making my own music goals a reality, but after graduating, I became heavily burdened with student debt. I was forced to look at more stable day jobs. I landed in retail banking, but quickly found myself pretty unhappy with my day job, and I knew I had to make a career change. When the pandemic hit, I was lucky enough to keep my job, but as a bank teller, I was deemed essential and unable to work remotely, and my situation on the front lines became pretty scary. I was worried about contracting COVID. I know some other musicians that have gone into software development, and I started to wonder if I could do the same. I decided to look into these coding boot camps that were gaining popularity. There were many options for me to choose from, but ultimately I chose Coding Dojo because it was the most affordable and the most accommodating to my full-time work schedule. After I completed my coursework at Coding Dojo, I started looking for my first developer job. As part of my job search, I joined the Chicago chapter of the Latinas in Tech network. I connected with somebody who referred me to my current role. I'm now a software engineer at Breakthrough Technologies in Evanston. I'm in my second month on the job, and I'm thrilled to be part of their work in education technology and custom software solutions. With the difficulties that this pandemic has brought, I want other Latinas and Chicagoans to know that people want to diversify the tech industry. There are networks made for Latinas in STEM, and that there are affordable and accessible opportunities out there.
You can watch more in our La Ultima Palabra series on our website, wttw.com/news. And that's our show for this Saturday night. Join Brandis Friedman tomorrow night for Chicago Tonight Black Voices. She'll talk with local Black journalists and their take on the Derek Chauvin trial and guilty verdict for the murder of George Floyd. And it's the movies industry's biggest night. Hear from a hairstylist about her history-making Oscar nomination for her work in the film Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. And you can catch me hosting Weekend Edition Saturdays and Sundays, as well as my reporting during the week on 91.5 WBEZ. And next week on Latino Voices, Marissa Parra with CBS 2 Chicago will be here in the host chair. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, I'm Araceli Gomez Saldana. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us, and stay healthy and safe. Buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud of its partners named Illinois leading lawyers by the Law Bulletin Publishing Company of Chicago.